Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Chats with Emily, as we are calling our reading through all of the poems of Emily Dickinson contained in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 136, Have You Got a Brook in Your Little Heart? The number 4 is going to be significant in this poem. 4 times the word little, 4 times the word brook will get used. Now this is another poem for Emily about longing, about maybe hope. We'll think a little bit about what's exactly going on here. She's talking about inspiration, poetic, possibly inspiration. We'll get into it. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already been introduced to our set of introductory comments. I'm also hopeful that you've already finished with the first 135 poems. We just finished with Water is Taught by Thirst. Now, the first thing I want to point out is that the word blow in line 2 means bloom. Okay, so that will be significant. And I want you to pay attention to the symbolism of a little brook. Okay, up here we call them creeks, okay, brooks. Have you got a brook in your little heart where bashful flowers blow and blushing birds go down to drink and shadows tremble so, and nobody knows, so still it flows, that any brook is there, and yet your little draught of life is daily drunken there? Why, look out for the little brook in March, when the rivers overflow and the snows come hurrying from the hills and the bridges often go. And later, in August it may be, when the meadows parching lie, beware lest this little brook of life, some burning noon, go dry. Now, clearly we're dealing with some symbolism at play here. But I want to point out right away the construction, the syntactical construction of have you got a brook? Well, that's obviously a question. And in that regards, where's our question mark? So if you're physically looking at this poem, and I hope you are, you'll notice that Emily stays away from the question mark in this poem, which is kind of interesting. Notice, have you, and who's the you that we're talking about, right? I want you to hear all the B sounds, by the way, of this poem. Have you got a brook in your little heart? Now, the word little here, of course, 4 times in this poem. We commented already that 172 poems will use this word, little. It is a word of Emily that she constantly is referencing, sometimes to herself, to show any number of reasons. Have you got a brook in your little heart where bashful flowers blow, as in bloom, right? And blushing birds go down to drink and shadows tremble so. The only other use of the word tremble is in poem 443 when we get to that one. Now think about shadows and think about our comments on Plato's Republic, book 7, and the cave allegory, looking at shadows on a wall and all of that. And I think all of a sudden the poem starts to kind of open up in brilliant ways. In other words, what is she asking? Do you have this thing that's inside of you? Can we call it a muse? Can we call it inspiration if we're talking with artists? You bet. Do you have this source? So, if you're an Ayn Rand, you know, enjoy Ayn Rand's work, it would be the fountainhead, right? This source. Have you got a brook in your little heart where bashful flowers blow and blushing birds go down to drink and shadows tremble so? And then to finish, and nobody knows. Now that's the key. By the way, poem 288, when we get there, I'm nobody, who are you? And nobody knows, so still it flows. I said to you already in a number of poems earlier that her use of the word still, 95 poems, she will use this word still. And I've said that T.S. Eliot learned, I believe, to use the word still from his study of Emily Dickinson. We must be still and still moving into another intensity, he will say in East Coker 5, right? We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net, and nobody knows, so still it flows. In other words, the source, what could we say? The source of joy, she's going to call it the drought of life, right? The source of enthusiasm, the source of hope. It's always ever present, so still that nobody would even know that it flows, that any brook is there, right? And again, 4 times this word brook is used. And yet, your little drought of life. Now, when we get to poem 1725, near the very end of our study, it will read like this. I took one draught of life. I'll tell you what I paid, precisely in existence, the market price, they said. They weighed me dust by dust. They balanced film with film, then handed me my being's worth. a single dram of heaven. This drought of life, right? And yet your little drought of life is daily drunken there. Again, this source of your inspiration, your hope, your longings. And now this why look out. Now this use of the word why is in some ways just pure Americana, okay? Sometimes when I'm asked, what makes Emily an American poet, I can point to things like this, where this filler word, why, we especially the old timers love to do this, why, and it was just a filler, the way sometimes today people use the word so, and they don't really mean anything by the word. Here it is, why, look out for the little brook in March. Now, this look out phrase only gets used one time in all of our poetry, and it's here. Again, we're back to the word little again. And the word brook again. Why, look out for the little brook in March, of course in the spring, when the rivers overflow. By the way, note the construction. At the first stanza, it's where and for lines 2, 3, 4. Here it's where and, when and. When the rivers overflow in March, obviously in the spring, and the snows come hurrying from the hills and the bridges just often go. Of course, we're familiar living out here in Wyoming with what we're talking about. In other words, in March, April, May, and into June, as the spring happens, as the thawing happens, then this brook can become a river, right? It's unbelievable what this little brook can become in March. And, notice italicized, later in August, notice italicized, so we go from March to August. It may be when the meadows parching lie. We're going to get to burning in a second, right? Beware, so we go from why, beware, lest this little brook of life, so now it's not a drought of life, it's a brook of life, some burning noon go dry. Now, this could be a cautionary tale. Those of us who read this poem as Emily talking about poetic inspiration, I think she's definitely suggesting that sometimes, we'll call it March, in the spring, your brook of life, your capacity for hope is immense, right? It's immense. It can even knock down bridges. But in August, at the end of a long summer, for example, when it's hot, parching, burning, right? It's very possible that the brook can almost be, it becomes what we out here, of course, have as no water, right? No water creek, okay? At 2A, I think the message here is take care of this drought of life. The things that are precious to you, that give you hope, that give you inspiration. At 2B, I love all the fours of this poem. I love brook, I love little, and I love the B sounds of this poem. Again, go back and read it on your own to enjoy all the B sounds. At 3A, how can we relate this to something else? I like to go to Milton at this point. Do you remember in Sonnet 7, How Soon Hath Time, and Sonnet 19, When I Consider How My Light Is Spent? We've given full lectures at LearnStrong.net on both these poems. What is it that Milton's dealing with at a very young age, and then of course right before he goes completely blind? Well, I think he's dealing with the same thing Emily is suggesting. There are moments when inspiration is incredible. There are other moments when not so much. Finally, at 3B, how do you hang on, hold dear your drought of life? And is this study with Emily helping you to do that? I certainly hope so. Thank you.